was not even the craziest press conference Mr. Giuliani gave that month. Just over a week later, he held another one, which would also go down in political history for something entirely unrelated to the spoken content of the event. I'm talking, of course, about the "what's that on his face" presser, the press conference at which Trump lawyer Mr. Giuliani appeared to be sort of melting before our eyes. I know that is what you remember about that event. None of us can ever forget it. But what was that event for, other than to haunt our dreams till we're dead? That event ostensibly was supposed to be a formal presentation by Rudy Giuliani and his legal team about how the election had been stolen from Trump. Giuliani told reporters at the hair dye press conference that Trump had won Pennsylvania by 300,000 votes and Michigan by 50,000 votes, and he could absolutely prove it. I mean, not that he had the evidence right then to show reporters that day, but he would have the evidence soon, and everybody should get ready. Evidence of all the corruption by the big city Democrats. He said he knew crimes were committed. He could smell them. Another member of Trump's legal team, Sidney Powell, then took the podium and explained, if you can call it that, that the election had been stolen by communists in Venezuela, also Cuba, also China. And the voting machines had been hacked by Hugo Chavez, even though he's dead. It's complicated, but trust us, it works out. Another Trump lawyer, Jenna Ellis, then got up and yelled at the media, who were all there to cover their allegations. She yelled at them for not covering their allegations. Also joining them on stage at that event was a Trump campaign advisor named Boris Epshteyn, who's the gentleman spot shadowed there on the right side of your screen. I'm pointing out all these folks because this evening, that whole crew from that Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs press conference, all four of them, Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, Jenna Ellis, and Boris Epshteyn, they have all been subpoenaed by the January 6th investigation in Congress. All four have been directed to produce documents to the investigation by the 1st of next month. They've all been ordered to appear for depositions a week later. Because as ridiculous as their quasi-legal efforts seemed at the time, as ridiculous as they seem even now in retrospect, the January 6th investigation is subpoenaing them, not because they're a joke, but quite the contrary. I mean, from the perspective of the investigation, these clownish folks were allegedly involved in the very worst of what was being plotted to overthrow the government and keep Trump in power even after he lost the election. As with so many things related to the Trump-era Republican Party, it's sort of simultaneously a clown show and a deadly serious threat. Giuliani and the rest of these guys technically were Trump's legal team, and they did bring a number of lawsuits alleging election fraud and malfeasance, and they were laughed out of court at every turn. In fact, Sidney Powell, the one with the, communist plot by dead Hugo Chavez, she was actually sanctioned by one court and referred for possible disbarment by the judge because the election lawsuit she brought before that court was so baseless and full of obvious lies. Mr. Giuliani has had his own trouble with his own legal license around these same matters. But it doesn't appear that the January 6th investigation is subpoenaing this group because it's interested directly in those legal efforts such as they were. Judging by the letters accompanying the subpoenas tonight, the investigation is interested in Mr. Giuliani and the legal team because of the ways those guys supported and facilitated the broader plot to try to overturn the election, even beyond the courts. I'll show you what I mean. This is from the letter to Mr. Giuliani tonight. Quote, the investigation has revealed credible evidence that you publicly promoted claims that the 2020 election was stolen and participated in attempts to disrupt or delay the certification of the election results based on your allegations. Remember, disrupting or delaying the certification of the results on January 6th, that became the main goal of Trump and his allies, if nothing else, so they could buy time to overturn the election. Either through the courts or, more likely, given how the legal challenges were going by the dozen, more likely some other way. The letters from the investigation tonight specifically mention Mr. Giuliani's attempts, often accompanied by Jenna Ellis, to convince Republican state legislators that they should falsify the election results in their states and say Trump won when he didn't. He did this road show in the weeks after the election, trying to get Republican legislators in swing states to declare the election invalid and instead send slates of Trump electors to Congress. The investigation also claims to have witness testimony about Mr. Giuliani, quote, urging President Trump to direct the seizure of voting machines around the country after being told that the Department of Homeland Security had no lawful authority to do so. Also, quote, according to public reporting on January 6th and in the days prior, you were in contact. This is the letter to Mr. Giuliani. You were in contact with then President Trump and members of Congress regarding strategies for delaying or overturning the results of the 2020 election. We know that Mr. Giuliani was on the phone with Republican U.S. senators on January 6th, even after the mob had stormed the Capitol, still trying to get them to stop or delay the certification of the election. They were still that night, even after the mob attack on the Capitol, trying to find a way to falsify the election results and keep Trump in power. The investigation's letter to Jenna Ellis specifically mentions 2 legal memos she prepared purporting to explain how Vice President Pence should reject or delay accepting the electoral votes from certain states that had submitted alternate slates of electors, false slates of electors. They never did succeed in getting Republican state legislatures in states Joe Biden won to send in official alternate slates of electors for Trump. But as we have been reporting on this show, nevertheless, Republicans in multiple states did sign forged documents claiming to be the real electors for their state, claiming that they were the duly elected electors from their state and that Trump had won, which was all bullpucky and may be prosecuted in multiple jurisdictions now as a crime. But it all appears to have been part of the same broad plan. And the Trump allies subpoenaed today were, according to the investigation, all over every aspect of it. Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis trying to get state legislators to falsify the election results in those states. Ms. Ellis writing legal justifications for Vice President Pence to overturn the results and not accept the electoral count. If that didn't work, Giuliani and Sidney Powell were trying to get President Trump to seize voting machines around the country and overturn the election himself with some sort of claims of military or executive power. Boris Epstein was at the Willard Hotel at the so-called command center on January 6th, allegedly talking by phone with President Trump about how they could stop certifying the election that day somehow, one way or another. They were determined to make it happen. And so it's no surprise that the January 6th investigation wants to talk to them, plans to compel them to talk by subpoena.